Portland Storytellers Guild. Our show tonight includes Will Hornyak. Come on up, Will. And Julie Strozyk. And me, Gretchen Peterson. We have stories tonight of sex. Let's hear love and death. And we bring you tonight's show from Artichoke Music. We are so proud to be in partnership with Artichoke, now in its 52nd year. A round of applause for Artichoke. And for this evening's performance, we want to thank our Artichoke volunteers. Taking tickets, Steve. Running sound and video, Gary. And at the bar, Trip. Now, speaking of the bar, I hope you got drinks, something to eat. We will have one intermission, give you another crack at the bar. And I love that Trip is running the bar because you just take away the R and he's get a big tip. Lots of, yeah, groan. Let's hear the groan. Remember, tip early and often. Tonight, storytellers, we will be pleased to hear your laughter. Let's hear your laughter. Your oohs. Your ahs. A gasp. Applause. Cell phones. No. Please make sure that your cell phones are turned off. Restrooms, we have 3 of them. We've got one right next to the stage, very convenient for the performers. But we also have 2. You just go down here, make a U-turn. There's one on the level floor here, and then up the stairs is another one. Now, when you entered, you had a chance to fill out a card telling us how you heard about the show. After intermission, we will draw a card. That person will get 2 free tickets to our March 8th show. And we also have a drawing for a special book that Julie brought tonight. 101 famous poems. And this edition was printed in 1929. Somebody very special and lucky is going to get this in the drawing. I also want to draw your attention to a wonderful book of poetry by one of our tellers, Will Hornyak, This Altar of Earth and Sky. These will be available for sale back at the entrance, $12, and you take cash, Venmo, PayPal, check, and any stolen eggs that you can find, right? A dozen. All right. Excellent. Please, I have a copy and it is absolutely delightful. All right. You really want to know about sex, don't you? Yes. And love and death. Those are the ties that bind us. Well, our show tonight, Julie and I will tell our stories in the first half. We'll have our 10-minute intermission, and then Will Hornyak will end the evening for us. But first, the 3 of us are going to join forces to tell this tale.
This is the earliest version of a tale that we all know and love. A tale of hunger, lust, sex, blood, and death. You know, a children's story. Made famous by who other than the Brothers Grimm.
But long before the Brothers Grimm, this is how the story was told by the peasant women in France in the 14th century to their adolescent girls. Once upon a time, a woman gave a basket of fresh bread, butter, and milk to her daughter and said, "Your grandmother is ill. Take her these things and keep the good woman company." On her way to Grandma's house in the woods, she met a werewolf. Not a wolf, a werewolf. Because no peasant girl would stop and talk to a wolf.
Well, the wolf encouraged the girl. "Go off, pick some wildflowers for your grandmother. She'll love that." And she did just that. And the wolf bounded away, broke into the house, murdered the old crone, feasted on some of her flesh, took other parts of her flesh and put it on a plate, decanted some of her blood into a carafe. He was French and a foodie at heart, you know. He took the plate, put it into the cupboard along with the carafe, and closed it.
Well, after that delicious meal, he lay down on the bed for a rest. Wouldn't you be a little tired after all that murdering, feasting, butchering, and decanting? He pulled a blanket over his head, and then he heard a knock at the door.
"Grandmother, it's me, your granddaughter, with fresh bread and butter and milk." And the werewolf said, "Come in, sweetheart. Help yourself to the meat in the cupboard and the wine in the carafe." And she did have a little bit of that. Come a little closer. Yes, get into the bed with Granny and keep me warm." And she did. But she soon realized that the smell of grandmother was not the smell she knew. And the eyes and the mouth and the teeth were not the ones that she knew. This wasn't grandmother at all. Oh. Ladies, have you ever had that problem? You know, he looked so good in the bar, but when you got him home, he was a wolf.
She thought quickly, and then turned to the wolf and said, "I need to take a crap." The wolf said, "Don't worry about it. Just go here." "Oh, no, that won't do. I'll go outside and I'll be right back." "Oh, we'll make sure of that," said the wolf. And he tied a woolen rope, which werewolves always carry with them. He tied one end of the woolen rope tightly to her ankle, and he held the other end tightly in his hand.
The girl walked out the door to a little courtyard where a plum tree grew. And as she was talking sweetly to the werewolf inside, she carefully untied the rope from her ankle and retied it to the trunk of the plum tree and said, "I'll be right back." And she sped off, leaving the werewolf tugging on the rope, which after a while he discovered was tied to the trunk of a tree.
But by then, the girl was far away, and she ran safely home, with neither a woodcutter nor a hunter to help. And she lived to tell the tale. And for centuries, it was told by women to girls to remind them of their own formidable inheritance of
Gumption, guts, and grit. And that's the tale.
Oh, yes, and our first teller of the evening will be Gretchen Peterson.
Thank you, Julie. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Stacy. My story begins when I was 10 years old at the beauty parlor with my mother, waiting to get my hair cut. I flipped through a People magazine. I turned the page, and I saw the picture that changed my life. It was like waves of light and electricity were pouring off of that page. My whole body tingled, and especially the top of my head, every hair seemed on fire. It was a picture of a young woman whose head was shaved. And the caption read, Irish singer Sinead, I later learned you pronounce her name Sinead O'Connor, tops the charts with Nothing Compares to You. Well, the beautician called me. I took the magazine with me, and I scrambled up and sat in the chair. She put on the apron. Well, Stacy, what are we doing for you today? I pulled out the magazine, opened it, pointed to that picture. She looked at the picture. She looked at me. She pried the magazine out of my hand and went marching over to talk to my mother. I could see it all unfolding in the reflection of the mirror. And I saw my mother's face change from she caught my eye in the mirror and said, absolutely not. So that day I got a pixie. That was as short as they would let me go. But that day, an obsession, a quest was born. Someday, I want to go to Ireland because women there get to shave their heads. Well, fast forward to my sophomore year in high school. My guidance counselor encouraged me to apply for a full scholarship at an all-girls boarding school for the last 2 years of high school. She said that if I was accepted and I did well and graduated, I would get a 4-year scholarship to the university that was attached to this school. Well, it sounded like a great deal because otherwise I wouldn't be able to afford to go to college. So I applied and I got accepted. Well, this was the orientation meeting. There was about 40 of us with the head mistress. Girls, welcome to Magoose, MGSE. That's the name of our school, affectionately known as Magoose. We're so looking forward to having you for your junior and senior years. And then you'll go on to our university, MGUE, affectionately known as Magooey. Magoose Magooey. Well, what do those stand for? MGSE, Magoose. Medusa Gorgon School of Espionage. MGUE, Magooey. Medusa Gorgon University of Espionage. Yes, girls, the United States government has identified each one of you as a Gorgon. Now, I see a lot of confused faces out there. You may not know what a Gorgon is, so let me explain. They were first identified back in ancient Greece. Fearsome women with snakes growing out of their heads. And their gaze was so lethal that they turned men to stone. The most famous Gorgon was named Medusa. Well, girls, we need your talent. We are going to teach you all about espionage. And then you will infiltrate our enemies and you will turn them to stone. Now, I see everybody looking around. Nobody has any snakes growing out of your head. Well, that's because you have been eating a diet of American junk food. Dunkin' Donuts, Oreos, Pringles. But starting today, you will eat a Mediterranean diet. lamb shawarma, spanakopita, tabbouleh, and in no time, you will have snakes growing out of your head. My first thought was, this doesn't sound like a place I'll be able to get my head shaved. I did not have time for a second thought because we were whisked from that meeting room and herded into the dining room where we had our first Mediterranean meal of all this weird food with weird names, baba ganoush and falafel and tzatziki, but I tell you, by dessert, something called baklava, we all had snakes growing out of our heads. Now, I had garden snakes. Oh, they were green and cute, and I had about 30, 40 of them. Then there was boa constrictor girl. Whoa, she had one in front, one in back, one on each side. Then there was rattlesnake girl. Oh, she had 8 in front, and she actually had the tails that were always rattling. And I thought, how can she be a spy? She'd never be able to sneak up on anybody. But the star of our class was Cobra Girl. Whoa, the most beautiful Egyptian cobras. And she was so clever. For Halloween that year, she painted her face gold. And somehow she got the cobras to stick out horizontally. And they were alternating colors, blue, gold. And she had one in front. Get it? She was King Tut. Well, at Magoose, we had our regular high school classes of like algebra and social studies. Then we had all of these classes in espionage, along with classes in how to be a Gorgon. That is, turning living things to stone. We started with insects. I did pretty good with beetle bugs, they're creeping along kind of slowly. But when we got to crickets, well, they're jumping all over the place. And the only way I could ever get a cockroach was to trap it into a corner. Well, I got a C in insects. Well, next after that was mammals. Oh, I had a really hard time with mammals because they're mammals. I mean, they've got hair and faces and teeth and little hearts. We started out with mice, and I could turn the tail to stone, and then it would detach, and the mouse would skitter off. Well, I thought I was going to fail, but Cobra Girl, she rescued me. I mean, I was still on mice, and she had graduated to rats and guinea pigs and suckling pigs. Well, she helped me with all my homework, and they even let her help me with the final test. Well, I got a B- in mammals. Well, I want to talk about now about the stereotype of all girls boarding schools. Girls have crushes on each other. There's all of this lesbian activity going on the QT. Well, at Magoose, it wasn't on the QT. They encouraged it. The instructors put it like this. Girls, in the olden days, women used to go to the restroom in pairs. Well, we are going to send you to infiltrate enemy territory in pairs. And if you're in love with each other, all the better. We even saw this really low-budget training film on this. There was these 2 Gorgons, and they got into the enemy embassy, and the Alpha Gorgon said to the Beta Gorgon, "You take the attaché, I'll take the ambassador." They turned them to stone. But they didn't really turn anybody to stone. It was just these really lame, paper mache statues. But then they kissed. Well, it's probably no surprise, but I had this huge crush on Cobra Girl. And she liked me too. And senior year, we started going out. I asked her to prom. Of course, she said yes. And I want to talk about the stereotype of prom. You go to the dance, you rent a hotel room, and you have sex for the first time. Well, at Magoo's, that was encouraged. They made the hotel reservations for us. Oh, we were dancing that night, and I remember that mirrored ball was turning, and it was reflecting all the serpents and the vipers. Oh, and then Cobra Girl and I, we were holding hands in the elevator. We took it up to our room. We were, nervous and giggly, and we got to our room. We're, kissing, making out. We'd done that before, but this time it was like our snakes were kind of getting into it too. Well, we took off our clothes. We got into bed, and we're, going at it, and then, much to the surprise of both of us, it wasn't just the hair on our heads that were snakes. Yeah. Let your mind wander on that one. It was wild. And I tell you, everybody that night had an orgasm. After that night, I was so optimistic about my future. We would graduate from Magoo's, go on to Magooey, and then Cobra Girl and I, we'd go all over the world, turning our enemies to stone, and then we'd retire with a government pension. It was like, yeah, I'm in on this. But then, a week before graduation, everything changed. I was sitting out on the grass in the commons with Boa Constrictor Girl and Rattlesnake Girl and me and my girlfriend, Cobra Girl. And we were talking about where we wanted to be posted eventually, overseas. And Boa Constrictor Girl, she wanted to be in Rome. And Rattlesnake Girl, she wanted to be in Tokyo. And I blurted out my childhood dream. I want to go to Ireland. Whoa. Silence. And then I felt the garden snakes on top of my head. They were like twitching and whimpering. And Boa Constrictor Girl, those boas, they were coming at me. They wanted to strangle me. And Rattlesnake Girl. But the worst was my girlfriend, Cobra Girl. Those cobras, their fangs, I could see the venom dripping. And my girlfriend, Cobra Girl, oh, she stared at me with such hatred. If I hadn't been a Gorgon, she would have turned me to stone. I said, what'd I say? And my girlfriend, Cobra Girl, she hissed, Ireland doesn't have snakes. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, after that, my girlfriend, Cobra Girl, she broke up with me. She said I couldn't be girlfriends with anybody who was so stupid that didn't know that Ireland doesn't have snakes. And who'd want to go to Ireland anyway? Well, I should have been more upset about that than I was. It was a great wake-up call. Did I really want to spend the next 20, 30 years going around the world smiting my enemies, turning them to stone? Hell no! I wanted to go to Ireland! Now, if I was making up this story, I tell you an elaborate tale of espionage, of how I got to Ireland, with all the spy tricks I learned about, disguises and poisons and sword canes. But this is a true story, so I'll tell you the truth. We graduated, and as far as anybody knew, I was still going to start Magooey in the fall. I already had a summer job lined up at Magoose in the garden, turning slugs to stone. It was a great job, and it paid a lot. Well, I saved my money, and I bought a one-way ticket to Dublin, Ireland, leaving 1 week before I was supposed to start at Magooey. Well, the day before my flight, I took a train into the city. I rented a hotel room, and I went out and I bought a bunch of American junk food. And I took that hoard back to my hotel room, and I'm eating the Big Mac and the Whopper and the Pop-Tarts, and by the time I got to the Twinkies, all the snakes in my head were gone, and my regular hair was back. So I flew to Dublin, getting through customs. Anything to declare? Nope. Are you bringing in any exotic animals? No, of course not. I got through customs. I got into Dublin. I rented a hotel room. And the next day, I found a Mediterranean restaurant. And I ordered the vegetarian mezza lunch to go. Well, I took that boxed lunch to the center of this beautiful park in the middle of Dublin. I sat on the grass, I took off my shoes and my socks, and I wriggled my toes in that green grass of Ireland. And I put my hands on the grass, the earth of Ireland. And I said, we're going to test this theory that there are no snakes in Ireland. I opened my box lunch, and I picked a stuffed grape leaf. And I bit into it, all that slick leaf and the warm rice stuffing. Oh, and I felt a sharp pain in the top of my head, and one of my garden snakes shot out, and it curled around, and its little face looked at me upside down. And then it detached from my head. And it flew over my box lunch, and it landed on the grass, and it was twitching and jerking, and then it got on fire. And then poof, ash. Okay. I took another bite of my grape leaf. That twitching, shivering fire, ashes. Detach. Twitching, fire, ashes. I took the lid off the baba ganoush. And I dipped in the pita bread. And that smoky, tangy baba ganoush. This ring was forming around me of these writhing snakes on fire, turning to ashes. I picked up the container of hummus, and I opened that, and the pita and that smooth hummus. Then came the piece de resistance. Falafel. Oh, that warm, crunchy falafel. I dipped it in the yogurt tzatziki sauce. Oh, the crunch and the sour. until there were no more snakes. And I said, all right, this is the final test. Dessert. Baklava. I took that triangle of baklava. That crispy phyllo dough. Cinnamon, walnuts, syrup. No more snakes. And then I felt the top of my head. My head was shaved, just like I'd always wanted. Well, I put on my shoes and socks. I picked up my trash, and I looked at this ring of ashes. I stepped over it. I threw away my trash, and then I swear to God, I saw the name of this park in Dublin. Phoenix Park. Yeah, Phoenix. That was me, rising from the ashes. Well, I felt a little woozy after all that. And lucky for me, right across the park was a lesbian pub. I staggered in, I plopped myself down in a booth, and I ordered a ginger beer. I was sipping my ginger beer, and this beautiful woman walks by. She asked if she can join me. I said, sure. And she said, I just love your haircut. You look just like Sinead O'Connor. Sinead, oh, is that how you pronounce it? I always thought it was Sinead. Well, Sinead, well, thank you. Well, thanks. I've always wanted to have my hair cut like her. Oh, you're American. What on earth are you doing in Ireland? Well, there's a story about that. Would you like to hear it? Oh, I'd love to hear your story. After all, I'm Irish. Well, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Stacy. Thank you so much, and I'd like to wish everyone a happy Chinese New Year, the year of the snake. And next we have our wonderful, talented, beautiful Julie Strozyk. Julie.
Yes. Thank you. There we go. I think. A lot of people have asked me over the years, Julie, how did you get into storytelling? What prompted this? And I always tell them, it's because I've always loved words. Words can make you feel things. Words can make you see things. Words are just fun. I guess it kind of started when I was just a little thing. I didn't have very many playmates, and so I talked to myself all the time. And that was kind of fun and interesting. Then I went to school, and, you know, kids have imaginations. I had an imagination. Oh, yeah. When I was in the 6th grade, my family made a trip out to the Estacada area, and I saw a building out there, an old brown building that looked like it was about to fall down, but it was still all in one good piece, and it had a cupola on the top. And I thought, I wonder what that is. It might have been a church at one time, but in my creative imagination, I thought it might be a schoolhouse, with the bell up in the belfry. And that's when the story came into being. There were 3 children, Jack, Terry, and Louise, and they wanted to explore this old schoolhouse. And they discovered that there was a mad scientist living there. And he had contact with a vampire. And they had this amazing adventure. And I started telling that story on the playground. And my 6th grade teacher, God bless her, Mrs. Gertrude George was her name. And she lived to be over 100 years old. Well, I don't know if she was just getting ready to retire, because she did retire at the end of our school year. But maybe she just needed a little extra time to prepare or whatever. She had me come up to the front of the class and tell my story. And I nattered on for, I felt like an hour, and the kids loved it. And I was very pleased with myself when I was finished. And I kind of went away thinking, yeah, I'm a storyteller. Yeah, all right. Well, that was one part of the fun. But the next year, I got into it in other ways. I began to write poetry. And some of it actually rhymed, In fact, somewhere in here, I have a copy of a poem that I wrote. It was kind of a strange situation. I was riding home on the school bus, and we crossed the Tualatin River across a little kind of unknown bridge on Highway 212. And as we rode across, I looked down the river, and it was a beautiful autumn day. And all the trees lining the river were this marvelous golden color. And I looked at them, and it just washed over me how beautiful they were. The bus crossed over the bridge, went up and around the corner to my bus stop. I got off, I walked home, and I wrote a poem. And it wasn't like I worked on it. It wasn't like it took me a long time. It was like I had a little muse that lived in my pocket, and all I had to do was reach in and pull her out. I think she looked like Tinkerbell for some reason or another. But she just helped me write, and out came the words. And I'm going to read it to you, whether you want to hear it or not. The earth was like a carpet of the coolest, softest green. The sky was clear and sapphire blue, such as I'd never seen. The clouds that floated o'er my head were wispy, white, and few, and all the trees that round me stood were of a golden hue. The clouded river in the vale flowed through an arch of gold and mirrored back the radiance, a glory to behold. The scent of cider mixed with smoke swirled round and round my head. Again I see the crackling fire and apples, sweet and red. I knew that all these lovely things God gave the world to see. This was the way he showed his love for all humanity. Although I had to leave that world of regality and gold, I knew that I would not forget that glorious manifold. Today I saw the trees again and heard the river roar. I could not find the golden arch that I had seen before. The wind blew all the leaves away and made the river roll. It blew away the billows that enhanced a glowing coal. I cannot help but wonder if the trees so gray and tall had really held such beauty, or was it there at all? Perhaps the glory that I saw was just an autumn dream. Perhaps I saw a vision bright, a bit of heaven's gleam. I guess I'll never know for sure till next September when the magic of my autumn dream shall come to me again. You see how green, how yellow that paper is? That's how old it was, okay? Now it was fun writing poetry, just pulling things out of my pocket, so to speak. And I went on and I wrote a lot more when I was in high school. I was published many times in our yearly arts magazine, and that was great. And I think, I'm not sure if it was this poem or another, it got published in a magazine published by my Sunday school, so that was really exciting. And that's what I did, and that's because I love the words so much. I wrote poetry in college, but it wasn't that great. I think I'd gotten rather discouraged with my writing by that time. I was put into an advanced writing class. Big mistake. I was not advanced enough for that class, and I just really didn't care for it. But it's okay. I did all right, you know. Well, time passed. I got out of college. I did a lot of stuff. I'd write some poems every now and then, although they were mostly just emotional writing, you know, emotional ranting and raving. But anyway, I did that for a while. And then, not too many years ago, I joined a medieval recreation group. And I decided I was going to become a bard. I was going to tell stories and sing songs and do wonderful things. And I did. And I wasn't half bad at it. It was okay. So that's kind of how I've always loved words and things like that. That love has kept me going for a long, long time. But, you know, it's a weird thing. There comes a time in your life when, you know, you're not that young kid anymore. You look around and maybe some of your friends aren't there anymore. And I found myself in kind of a bad spot a couple of years ago. I was getting pretty depressed about the fact that I was losing my friends and just not being there, you know, as well as I had been. But I decided, no, I'm going to buck up. I'm going to make it work for me. And that's when I picked up my copy of that book that we're going to give away later. My copy is a book that my mother was given by a voice teacher, of all things. And it had all kinds of poetry in it. And I had sat down one summer and had read that entire book. Came away with all kinds of poems that I dearly loved. And I thought of one when I was getting depressed about getting older. I want to share it with you. All these papers. This is a poem by Edmund Vance Cook, and it's called How Did You Die? Did you tackle that trouble that came your way with a resolute heart and cheerful? Or hide your face from the light of day with a craven soul and fearful? Oh, a trouble's a pound or a trouble's an ounce. A trouble is what you make it. And it's not the fact that you're hurt that counts, but only how did you take it? You're beaten to earth? Yeah, well, what's that? Come up with a smiling face. It's nothing against you to fall down flat, but to lie there, that's disgrace. The harder you're thrown, the higher you'll bounce. Be proud of your blackened eye. It isn't the fact that you're licked that counts, but how did you fight and why? And though you be done to death, what then? If you battled the best you could, if you played your part in the world of men, well, the critic will call it good. Death comes with a prowl or he comes with a pounce. And whether he's slow or spry, It's not the fact that you're dead that counts, but only how did you die. Thank you, Mr. Cook. That's true. I found that poem gave me so much, I don't know, just chutzpah. It was like, don't give up. Never give up. A couple of years ago, I was talking to one of my very close friends. And I was saying how when I get old, I want to go into a really nice retirement home. You know, like the ones you see on TV. You know, like the shag community, which always makes me laugh. I don't know about you, but I cannot believe that someone associated with that community had never seen an Austin Powers movie to understand that shag does have a different meaning. But evidently not. But anyway, I was saying how, yeah, I'd love to live in a place like that, you know, with the nice furniture and the place in having the cocktails in the afternoon and the whole thing like that. And I told my friend, and he looked at me with this horrified expression. "Oh, Julie," he said. "Oh, Julie, you don't want to be with old people." Well, I never had a problem with old people. I mean, when I was a kid, I got along well with my teachers and with other adults. And my God, I hang out with old people a lot. I mean, this is the Storytellers Guild. Look around. There's not a lot of spring chickens here, you know. So I couldn't understand his feeling on that. But he was like, "Oh no, old people. Oh, they're cranky all the time. They're crabby. They never think anything's good, and you can't have a good conversation with them. And half the time they smell bad. So what do you want to be with them for?" I let it go. But it was sad because a few years later, my friend died. What happened was he had taken a fall, and either he didn't know that he had hurt himself badly, or, and this is what troubles me the most, or he knew that he was hurt, but he decided that this was the time to make his exit, so he wouldn't have to be with old people. I sometimes wonder if my mother did the same thing. She died when she was 63. That's 11 years younger than I am now. And she had kind of a rough time of it. Oh, she also had a bad heart, and she smoked like a chimney, as well as drank like a fish, but that's beside the point, you know. You know, I always figured she just went to bed one night and didn't get up. I don't want to do that. I don't want my life to come to an end like that. I've been trying very hard to pull myself out of it, and I think I'm getting there. I think I'm beginning to realize that while there are things that I can't do anymore, there are plenty of things out there that I can do. And there are things I haven't even discovered yet. And I'm going to keep on looking, and I'm going to keep on trying. And it's going to be fun. Yeah, it really is going to be fun. One of the things I think I'm going to get back into is poetry writing. I mean, I'm quite inspired by the two people I'm working with here. Gretchen writes wonderful stories, and Will is a poet. I think he's always been a poet, but now he's a published poet, so buy his book. And this is the little poem I wrote when I was taking a class in Celtic poetry. It's got lots of alliteration in it. That means words that start with the same letter. So listen carefully. It's a special poem for this time of the year when winter is giving way to spring. Warm wind wrought by Bridget's breathing gathers green, moist, misty, mild, rising, wrenched from winter dreaming, Blood flows fresh in Merlin's child. Seeks where sparkling springs are flowing, Mother's menses, blood of earth, wayward waters of all-knowing bring about the second birth. Nights of starshine, fiery flickers, icy flakes near warming fire, bloated body quakes and quickens, heeds the frog song from the mire. Words of wonder call and clamor, sprites and spirits yet unseen. Breathe the breath and follow freely. Comes the rising of the green. Thank you very, very much. I was hoping you wouldn't all be too bored. Now it is time for a 10-minute intermission. So please imbibe and do whatever you need to do. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to pull out the snake, so let's... I have a question before we start the second half. Who is here at Artichoke, Portland Storytellers Guild for the first time? Yes! Welcome. Thank you so much. We are so delighted to have you here. We're going to have a drawing now for our show that we are going to have on March 8th. I'm going to pick it right now. First, let me give you a preview of that show, Beyond Belief, with Janice Alexander, Brian Rohr, and Trish Anderson. They tumble through outrageous and questionable childhood memories and other peculiar tales. And this is John Wilder. John, where are you? Well, he's not here then. Let's pick another one. Piper. Piper. Now, question. Are you going to be able to make the show? Okay, excellent. Wonderful. We will get information to you. So good that you got this. All right. Now, we are going to have the drawing for Julie's book from 1929, which is the year of the stock market crash and when both my parents were born. So, the eternal balance right there. Melanie Rose? Oh my goodness! Wow! Do not throw that at any hoops. Read that. That is so good. And one of our first timers here. So this is fantastic. Congratulations. Well, we also have, in addition to these live shows, we have shows on Zoom. And the next one coming up, one of our Zoom extra shows, features a single storyteller. This will be next Saturday, February 15th at 5 p.m. Ingrid Nixon will present We Beasties, Mere Mortals, and Other Suspects. Now, Portland Storytellers Guild, we have so much going on besides just our performances. We have a monthly story swap that is now also on Zoom. It's always the third Saturday of the month. Oh, excuse me, Sunday. The waves of the... What day is that, Barb? Sunday. 3 o'clock, next Sunday, February 16th. It is a safe, encouraging place where hatchling stories can start peeking out of their shells. You're invited to come and just listen if you want. If you have a story that you're thinking about, you can tell it. It's 5 to 7 minutes. You can get feedback, not feedback. That's how I started at the Guild, was going to one of these story swaps, so I highly recommend them. And if you have any other questions about anything that we've got, you can always go to our website, portlandstorytellers.org. Now, speaking of stories and storytellers, let's return to our second half of Sex, Love, and Death. And who better to tell us a story than the one, the only, the established, distinguished, wonderful, upright, Mr. Will Hornyak.
Established and upright. I like that. Still, anyway. Yeah. Let's see. How you doing? Good. We are a mighty crowd here tonight. What a great place this is, isn't it? What a treasure, you know? Place of community, performance, music, and education, too. A lot of people learn how to play and how to sing here. I wanted to tell you a story, but to start out with, there was a very beloved teacher. He was a mystic. He was an educator. He was a holy man. His name was the Rabbi Baal Shem Tov. Anybody heard of the Baal Shem Tov? He was born in 1698 in the Ukraine, and he saw many, many horrible things during his life, you know, as a Jew living in Eastern Europe. He saw the pogroms, the violent attacks upon Jews, land clearings, and imprisonments. But somehow, throughout his whole life, he reputedly maintained this incredible attitude of compassion and kindness and love for all of humanity. And although he was a brilliant scholar of the Torah, he was best known as a storyteller. And he would tell stories about how the great spiritual truths could be lived day by day in the world. And he had many, many, many wise sayings, but among them, and one of my favorites was, he would say, sometimes when the bonds that hold heaven and earth together are strained to the point of breaking, not even a prayer can help. Only a story can mend it. Only a story can mend it. And in some cases, it takes lots and lots of stories to mend it. Not only stories, I think, that he meant, but also the ritual of storytelling. The way that it ushers us from this world into a whole other world through that very simple incantation. Not thrice, not twice, but once upon a time. There was a king, not just any king, a king of kings, and his name was Shariah. You want to try it? Shariah. He ruled from the capital of Baghdad. He ruled a vast realm upon realms. He commanded a great army. He controlled vast networks of trade and commerce. Silver and gold filled his coffers, and his fields were filled with grain. His flocks and herds multiplied, and his people, they were prosperous, abundant, peaceful, and happy. And you can imagine, with all this harmony, trouble is not far away. For every tale needs trouble, and every teller of them as well. No, trouble came to the heart of the realm. It came to the very heart of the great king. And trouble came in a way that trouble often comes, in love. For the king, you see, he had a wife whom he loved dearly. But he found out that she had betrayed him, was unfaithful to him. He discovered that she had been unfaithful to him a number of times. And his anger became rage. And in his rage, he went to his vizier, his minister, And he said, take that woman and all of her consorts to the executioner's dungeon and make sure that his scimitar, that sharp sword, finds the place between her head and shoulders known as her neck, as well as all the others. And that was done. But the king's anger, it grew into rage, and it grew into madness. And in his madness, he said, and now I will make sure that I am never, ever betrayed by a woman again. And he began a strange and awful custom. Every day, he would marry a maiden. Every night, he would sleep with her and deflower her. And every morning at dawn, he would have her beheaded. This lasted for almost 3 years' time. And the people of Baghdad, they were enraged, they were angry, they were sad, but the power of this king was absolute and nothing could be done. Now the king had a minister, a vizier, and he was the one given the responsibility to carry out the executions. He didn't swing the blade, but he saw that it was done. And this vizier had 2 daughters, and their lives were spared because they were the daughters of the minister. The oldest one's name was Scheherazade, and the younger one by several years was Dunyazad. Now, Scheherazade had been educated in the arts and the sciences. She had studied widely. She was a compendium of stories from the known world, China, Africa, India, all of those places. But more than that, Scheherazade, she was a denizen of Baghdad. Ever since she was a young girl, she would wander through the winding streets. It was a place of great mystery. Arches everywhere, and fountains, and great bazaars, and salons of women weaving and telling tales and gossiping. There were great bazaars where there would be storytellers and musicians everywhere. And Scheherazade, year upon year, she soaked all of this up. And she became a teller of tales. She became a story in herself. She was more at home in the world of story, imagination, and dream than she was in the waking world. And she went to her father one day, the minister, and she said, I beg of you, make me the next bride of that king. For I have a way in which I might live. And if I can survive, I will gladly be the ransom for my sisters. And her father said, Scheherazade, are you mad? You know what will happen to you. I forbid it. And she said, Father, if you forbid it, I will send message to the king, and I will tell him, I longed to be your bride. But my father said that to do so would be to marry beneath me. He said, you would not. She said, I would and I will. She was a woman of incredible heart and courage. In time, he had no choice. In time, he relented, and the wedding was planned. But a day before it occurred, Scheherazade went to her sister, Dunyazad, who pleaded with her, Scheherazade, please, sister, don't. You cannot wed yourself to this murderer. I know that you will die. Scheherazade said, I know that, Dunya, but how can I live? How can I live in this place where this king murders our sisters day upon day, and our father's own hands are washed in their blood? Something must be done to stop him. But Scheherazade, Dunyazad said, how can you stop him? Dunya, the king is under a spell. He is captive to one story that he repeats to himself again and again and again, which is, I have been wounded by a woman, I have been betrayed by a woman, and because of that, all women will suffer. Listen to me, Dunya. A wise person has many, many stories. A madman, only one. Yes, Scheherazade. And you would marry this madman? You would lie with him in his bed? Dunya, Scheherazade said, the king was wounded in the bed of marriage. He can only be healed in the bed of marriage. There are times when one must marry the problem to solve the problem, sister. And then she said, Dunyazad, please, I beg of you, listen to me now and do what I tell you. A day later, the wedding took place. It had the feel more of a funeral than a wedding. But in time, as the day wore on, Scheherazade made her way to the king's chamber. And in the king's chamber, he coupled with his new bride, as he had done with hundreds of brides before her. There was no passion. There was no pleasure in it. It was cold and mechanical. And indeed, Scheherazade had felt more delight in her loins, astride her horse, riding in the desert on moonlit nights. But when he finished his deflowering of yet another maiden, there came a knock at the door. It was Dunyazad. Scheherazade, sister, please, open to me. I know that the hour of your death grows near. Please, I must see your face one last time before you die, sister. Please. Scheherazade appealed to the king, who allowed Dunyazad to enter, and now you could see them. The king and Scheherazade upon the bed there, leaning back against the pillows, Dunyazad at the foot of the bed. And then she said, Sister Scheherazade, please, so that my last memory of you is sweet, would you tell me one of your lovely stories? And Scheherazade said, I would gladly do that, Dunya, if it is the pleasure of our just and pious king. Now the king had not heard any stories in a long, long time, other than the story of his own pain and woe and grief. And he said, well, I would enjoy a little tale. He had no idea in whose presence he was. Scheherazade, she leaned back. She clothed herself in a red silk robe, slightly open to reveal the curve of her breasts. Her black hair tumbled down her shoulders. She daubed the essence of rose oil on her wrists, lavender upon her earlobes. She gazed at the king with her dark eyes, and she began to speak. Her voice was strong, and yet it was honeyed. It was rich. It was practiced. Now, the king was a man of words, but words to him were tools to make pronouncements and to make commands and to issue proclamations. But to Scheherazade, words were music and rhythm and sound. She was an alchemist of language. And as she spoke, the very air of the room began to change. And in no time, she wove words into poems, and poems into songs, and songs into tales. And she wove and wove until she had woven a great carpet. And upon that carpet, she lifted the king far away from this room of travail and trouble and suffering and woe. And all through the night, she told him remarkable tales. And in that way, his eyes opened. His heart began to feel. He began to see and began to think as he never had in a long time. It was as if the words of Scheherazade were like soft rain upon a desert that had not known water in a long time. And it stirred the seeds to life again. As she spoke, it was like someone had opened a window to a room that hadn't known air or light in a long, long time. And the king's heart had opened. His eyes were wide like that of a child as she led him on through tale to tale to tale. And as the night wore on, at last, she was telling him a story of a beloved merchant, a man who had been away from family for over a year, doing business, collecting debts. But now he was on his way home, only a day's ride from home. And his family had prepared a great feast. All were soon to turn out to greet him. But he stopped at an oasis to water his horse. And he ate some dates. And when he did, he took the pits and he cast them into the air, and they fell down into the oasis, and they struck the head of an invisible, sleeping son of a genie. It's a fairy tale. Work with me here. But you know, what we do in this world has great impact on the other world, whether we know it or not. And just like that, from nowhere, this enormous genie appeared, took shape with a huge scimitar, the great curved sword, and he cried out, "Mortal! Infernal mortal! You have murdered my son, and now you too shall die." And the merchant, he said, "Great master of the jinn, what have I done? I would never hurt a child. What have I done?" "You have murdered, mortal. And it will be now as it has always been, a life for a life." And the merchant, he fell upon his knees, he pleaded, he wept, but the genie was unmoved. And he raised the scimitar high into the sky, and the sun caught the blade of it, and it gleamed. And it gleamed upon the blade. And, oh, Scheherazade said, "My lord, look. Just as the sun was gleaming upon the blade in the story, so the sun gleams now in our window. And so the dawn has arrived, and with it the hour of my death. And so I will not be able to finish the story." Which I'm sure you would agree has a most remarkable and surprising conclusion. The king awoke as if he had been in a beautiful dream. He was jolted awake. And then he saw where he was. He saw who he was with, and he wanted to hear the end of the tale. But he didn't want to be betrayed. He didn't want to trust a woman again, and yet he did indeed want to travel again with Scheherazade to that realm of tale and dream and story where he had been. "Scheherazade, I will grant you one more day of life so you can finish this little tale. But mark my words, tomorrow is your last day of life." And she bowed to him. She said, "You are good and great and kind, my lord. And I thank you for one more day of life." She went away. And Dunyazad said to her later, "And Scheherazade, you believe that the king will fall for this ruse again and again, that you alone will stop these murders, that you alone will go to the chamber with a sort of death hanging over you night upon night, all by yourself. You will do this." And she said, "Dunya, you listen to me now, for I must tell you something you've never known. We have a common mother, but your father and mine are different. Your father is the minister, but he is not mine. And I will tell you how that did happen. Our mother was a Scythian warrior, a horsewoman, a fighter, a poet, a teller of tales. She was captured by the king's army, and she was given by the king to the minister as a gift. He was mesmerized by her. He fell deeply in love with her, even though she was already with child. And that child that she gave birth to was myself. I knew my mother. I never knew my father. She stayed with us only 3 years' time, but I will never forget her. I can still smell the scent of her, the wild sage, the smell of wood smoke. I can feel her strong arms picking me up, pulling me to her chest, at times leaping upon her horse and riding with me. But after she had birthed you, Dunyazad, she could stay no longer. She could not be a minister's wife, attending to his affairs, a woman of the court. Dunyazad, our mother, was like a wild horse, not a domesticated creature meant to pull a plow. She stole the king's fastest horse, and she made her way off. And though she has been gone for some time, I have always felt her close, Dunya. We are not alone, sister. She is with me when I go into that chamber, and she always will be. We are not alone, Dunya. And so it was. Scheherazade went in the next night, and she she finished the tale. But she began another one shortly after. And it might surprise you to know she was not able to finish that one either by dawn. She was an artist after all, and don't they have trouble with closure at times, you know? And so it was, night upon night, with a sort of death hanging over her. Scheherazade would arrive and disarm the king with awe and beauty. She told tale upon fairy tale, upon myth, upon fable, from every corner of the world. And as she did, the king's heart began to feel. He began to see the world through the perspective of many characters. People that were good and loyal and wicked and wise and benevolent. He began to see things again and to realize there were many ways of thinking and seeing and feeling and being. And they say in time it was all those threads of the tales that eventually threaded his heart and closed the wound that he had known. And at long last, the king returned to be a man of wisdom and compassion and justice. In time, it might surprise you to know that in time, oh, shoot the time. Do I have enough time to? No, you. Okay. No, I get it. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't have the time to finish this particular story, but I want you to know that if you would grant me another day of life sometime, and I think you would agree, it has a most surprising and remarkable conclusion. You're tough, Gretchen. You're tough, let me tell you. Thank you very much. I just want to finish with a poem. We're doing sex, love, and death tonight, and this is my death chapter here. This is a poem that's in my book. It's dedicated to my wife, Conchetta, and it's called How I Would Like to Go. How I'd like to go. I'd like to go the way the old man Philemon and the old woman Baucis went in the Greek story. They took an evening stroll and were turned into two trees by the gods. Many years before, they had provided hospitality for Zeus and Hermes, who were disguised as common travelers. And because of their generosity, their hospitality, they were granted one wish. And they wished to never have to say farewell to each other. Said Hermes, "You two are mortals. You must die someday." Said Zeus, scolding his son, "Hermes, we are gods. We will find a way to honor the request of our friends." Many years later, while taking an evening stroll, Baucis's feet grew heavy and then began to sprout roots into the ground. Philemon's fingers, they turned into twigs and began to unfurl oak leaves. Their arms were slowly becoming branches. There was only enough time to reach out for one final human embrace, becoming, as they did, a stately oak and a beautiful linden lightly entwined. The Greeks say that for generations and generations and generations, the birds and the animals, they favored the shelter of those two trees. And travelers would often stop and rest beneath the shade of their spreading boughs. I too would enjoy such silence and stillness with my own beloved after this life of so much wandering and so many words. Thanks for coming out, everybody. See you. Julie, Gretchen, my partners in crime here. Sex, love, and death, right here. Thanks, Artichoke, for taking care of us and for hosting us. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Long live the Storytellers Guild.